On today's show, Ime Udoka hired as the next head coach of your Houston Rockets. Why he was the right choice for the job. What does this decision say about the Rockets organization moving forward? The direction of the organization moving forward. How much impact will he have on the draft, free agency, and more? All of that coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
The Houston Rockets select Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, and Jabari Smith Jr.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
Every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
Hey, Houston fans, I am so happy.
You're getting somebody who's going to come in with a chip on their shoulder, somebody who's going to come in and compete from day one.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ime Udoka is the next head coach of your Houston Rockets.
My God! Okay, it's happening. Everybody stay calm.
What's the procedure, everyone? What's the procedure?
Stay calm!
Wait.
Everybody calm down!
Oh my. Whoo, man. It still hasn't quite set in. What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, free and available wherever you listen to your podcasts, including YouTube. Go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Your thoughts on Ime Udoka as the next head coach of the Houston Rockets. Put them in the YouTube comments. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. That's prizepicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day. If you're an everydayer, if you listen to the show every single day, let me know in the YouTube comments, whether it's on the way to work, on your lunch break, at the gym. Thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day. Ime Udoka. The Rockets did not mess around. They didn't even make it through the second batch of interviews. It was reported that they were going to bring back Vogel and Udoka and bring in Nick Nurse for like their second round of interviews for the head coaching position, and they said, "Nah, we've got our guy. We know it's Udoka." Credit to the Rockets, man. They found their guy. There's so much to unpack from this. There's so many different angles to consider. And I don't even know if I'm going to be able to get to all of them in today's show. So I'm going to do my best. But this is exciting. Like, there's no other way to paint the picture. Like, this is so exciting. I feel for the first time so incredibly confident in the direction of this Rockets organization, because this was the first gigantic, big, like 72-point font, boldface, like question mark of this offseason was, who was the next head coach going to be? And there were some creeping concerns after the Raptors let go of Nick Nurse, right? Some reporting where it looked like maybe Ime Udoka was like their prime to be like the Raptors' like main candidate. And with how Masai Ujiri was kind of being so laissez-faire about the whole thing, it looked like, oh man, like maybe the Raptors were going to swoop in and grab Ime Udoka out from under the Rockets. And he was my number one coaching candidate, so I was terrified that was going to happen. They didn't mess around. Udoka didn't even entertain an interview with the Raptors. Per Adrian Wojnarowski, Udoka and Stone moved quickly toward a partnership upon an initial meeting. Recently, sources said Udoka decided against pursuing the Toronto Raptors job and other potential openings in this hiring cycle, sources said. The Brooklyn Nets considered hiring Udoka in the aftermath of their early season firing of Steve Nash, but ultimately decided to promote interim coach Jacques Vaughn instead. I mean, when you look at how this process went, right, and the names that were associated with this opening here in Houston, this role was highly attractive, right? They had former championship head coaches in Vogel and Nurse who had interest in the role. Obviously, Ime Udoka, Kenny Atkinson, Sam Cassell, James Borrego, a lot of really quality head coaches wanted this job. And for the Rockets to navigate that entire process and settle on Ime Udoka as their guy, it's incredible. They identified their guy, and they said the Rockets were confident that they were going to come away with a top-tier coaching candidate this offseason, and they did exactly that. kudos to the organization for making that happen. That was step one of this offseason, and they absolutely knocked it out of the park. And I know, because I've said it here in various other places, right? Frank Vogel crushed his interview, right? And I said, TBD, I feel like even before the Vogel interview had happened, I felt like Vogel and Udoka were kind of on the same tier, and then it was pending Udoka's interview. I felt that he could jump and leapfrog Vogel and be the front runner for the position. And clearly, that's exactly what happened, is he impressed Stone. Stone and the Rockets organization sold Udoka on the vision here in Houston for what he could build, what he could accomplish as the head coach of this Rockets team. And that marriage is not officially official yet, but it's reported, which basically makes it official. So it should happen, and Rockets fans should be incredibly excited about what Udoka brings to the table for this team. And we're going to get into some of the specifics here in just a moment about why Udoka was the right pick, but he doesn't come without his concerns, right? There is the issue of the off-the-court stuff that he did in Boston. It's worth at least revisiting that here in the reporting from Woj. An independent law firm probe into Udoka found that he used crude language in his dialogue with a female subordinate before the start of an improper workplace relationship with her, an element that significantly factored into the severity of Udoka's initial suspension, sources told ESPN in September. Those investigative findings, which described Udoka's verbiage as especially concerning coming from a workplace superior, contributed to what became an impossible pathway back to his reinstatement as Celtics coach. The power dynamic associated with a superior's improper relationship with a staff member was the primary finding and policy violation cited in the law firm's report, which was commissioned by the Celtics and completed in September. This is not something that's going to go away. This is something that Ime Udoka is going to have to address during his introductory press conference. Look, basically, Udoka is going to have to explain why the Celtics had to fire him, and the Rockets are also going to have to explain why they felt Udoka deserved a second chance, why they, after vetting him, after interviewing him, after going through the process, why they feel like everything is okay and that all the facts have been revealed and that there's not like another like smoking gun hiding somewhere and that the situation's not way worse and that there haven't been information swept under the rug. The Rockets and Udoka are going to have to address this. And until they do, like, it's kind of a TBD holding pattern thing, and it is something of relevance that has to be addressed. But until then, we have to operate under the assumption that the Rockets did their due diligence, that Udoka, in his interview with the organization, explained, hey, this is what happened. I was wrong for doing it, yada, yada, like, just, explained his side of the story. And he served his sentence, right? Like, he was suspended for a year. He was let go from arguably one of the best coaching positions in the entire NBA with a contending team in the Boston Celtics. He lost that job, right? He has kind of paid the price for his actions, and now he gets a chance to come to Houston and try to redeem himself a little bit. And I think it's interesting that when you look at this Rockets organization, top to bottom, it's kind of got sort of like this, like, there's a lot of guys organizationally that want to maybe rehabilitate their image, right? Tilman Fertitta has a certain like image, that he probably wants to rehabilitate from the end of the James Harden era, right? Rafael Stone kind of came under fire this most recent season, and he probably wants to rehabilitate that image a little bit. Udoka needs some redemption and needs to rehabilitate his image. And then you can even go down to some of the players, right? Kevin Porter Jr. is still in the process of trying to rehabilitate his image. So top to bottom, this is like the rehab team, and with a lot of guys who are probably incredibly hungry to prove, hey, we know what we're doing, and we want to show we are a competent, worthwhile organization that is doing the right things. And this hire, choosing Ime Udoka and getting him in the door and not even messing around with second-round interviews, picking him as your guy, what he's going to provide to this organization is the first step in that direction towards getting back to being a competent organization. So coming up, I want to get into some of the reasons why Udoka was the right hire, some of the things that we can expect from him as the Rockets head coach, reasons you should be excited about this hire for the Houston Rockets. We're going to get there in just one moment, but first, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Next game, how about Jason Tatum to score more than 26.5 points? What about LeBron James to have more than 7.5 rebounds? How about Kevin Durant to have less than 6.5 assists? And what about Steph Curry to have more than 3.5 three-pointers made? So What is PrizePicks? It's daily fantasy sports, but how does it work? Basically, you pick 2 to 6 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projections, you can win up to 25 times back on your money on any entry that you submit. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. And PrizePicks offers projections on any sport that you watch. That's NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, PGA. They've got you covered for all the action. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. They're safe. They offer incredibly fast withdrawals, currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. So download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. So don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Today's episode is also brought to you by Nissan. We've got your Nissan's Most Electric Player of the Week, which is brought to you by the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya. And you know what? I'm going to step a little bit outside of bounds for this Player of the Week. We're going to go with Rafael Stone as your Player of the Week, the guy who negotiated and handled the brokerage of this deal to hire Ime Udoka, went through the interview process, an electric performance from Rafael Stone. Look, this was the major question mark, the first of many major question marks this offseason for your Houston Rockets, and Rafael Stone handled it beautifully. Ime Udoka is a top-tier head coach that immediately elevates this Houston Rockets organization. So with this level of brilliant maneuvering and negotiating and selling Ime on the idea of becoming the Houston Rockets head coach, Rafael Stone has to be your Nissan Player of the Week. So if you need a little bit more electricity in your life, you need to check out the 2023 Nissan Ariya that packs pin-to-your-seat power and premium intelligence all in one electric vehicle. The all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya, the EV for people who love to drive. Shop now at nissanusa.com. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Ime Udoka is the next head coach of the Houston Rockets. Man, that feels so good to say. This is going to be such a monumental step up from Stephen Silas. I don't know if you realize just how rough the Rockets coaching situation has been the last few years. And for Udoka, there's so many things to consider when you look at just what he provides, what he's going to be able to do with the on-the-court product of this Rockets team, and so many of the boxes that he checks of areas that have been called into question with this Rockets team recently. The first of which is he is going to hold these guys accountable. Last week, we did a recent episode with a crossover with John Corrales from Locked On Celtics, who gave us some beautiful insight and analysis into what Udoka provides as a head coach. And I highly suggest if you missed that episode, please go check it out. John was fantastic. And I already had Udoka number 1 on my coaching board for the Rockets, and I felt even more confident in that choice after hearing what John had to say about him, right? He has a level of being able to connect with and motivate his players that makes him such a special head coach, right? He demands accountability. He demands respect from his players. But he's also able to motivate them to achieve things that they probably couldn't have otherwise, right? And there's a level of being able to connect with your players that I think Ime has that the other candidates didn't have, right? Being a former player allows you some of that cachet, right? Some of that connection to have with your guys. Whereas, if you're getting torn into by a Frank Vogel or a Nick Nurse, right? That doesn't carry maybe the same weight as an Ime Udoka, who has literally been there, done that, right? That's why coaches who have had that former player experience, and especially former players who weren't star players, right? Guys who really had to grind and scrap and claw and fight so hard for everything that they earned throughout their playing career. That's exactly what and who Ime Udoka was and is. And so he brings that to the table as a head coach. So he demands excellence, right? He demands accountability from his guys. And we could see that consistently during his tenure with the Celtics, right? We could see him up and down the sidelines, yelling at his guys, getting them to fight hard, getting them to play a certain way, getting them to buy into his vision of how the game should be approached. So I think he's going to, when you think about the dichotomy between Steven Silas as kind of this, offensive-minded, a little positive, good vibes, like all that, to Ime Udoka, who is going to be a defensive, I don't want to say tyrant, but just it's a night and day difference between personalities. It's probably about as far apart as you could get, on a scale of 1 to 10. And you got Ime on one side and Silas on the other side. They are about as different as you could possibly get as far as just human beings and their personalities and how they're going to approach managing that locker room. But what Ime brings, right, is he brings leadership to this Rockets locker room. I do not think Steven was cut out to be the leader of this group of guys on this Rockets team, and Ime can and will do that. And thinking about what he's going to be able to do with some of the players on this Rockets roster, right? He led the Celtics to the number 1 defense in the NBA and a top 10 offense. And yes, he had a lot of talent to work with when he did that. He had Jason Tatum, he had Jalen Brown, he had Marcus Smart, he had a lot going on in Boston and a lot of talent to work with. And guys who are much more experienced than this Rockets roster. This team is not going to suddenly become a contender next season. I need all Rockets fans to temper expectations for where this team is going to be at just next season. But they will take a gigantic step forward for sure. Thinking about what Ime Udoka will be able to do with guys like Jabari Smith Jr., Tari Eason, Ty Washington, Jalen Green, hell, even Kevin Porter Jr. I've said for a long time that I have this 3 to 5% in me that is still very curious what KPJ could or might become with a different head coach, right? Somebody who can really hold him accountable and give him some tough love, right? The way that John Lucas does, but from the head coaching spot. Ime might be that guy. Ime might be the guy who could turn KPJ into an all-star. Maybe not. We'll see, right? That's kind of one of the bigger question marks about the rest of this offseason for the Rockets is, how does the hiring of Ime Udoka factor into Kevin Porter Jr. and also a little bit Alperen Sengun? One of the narratives that I've seen kind of thrown around from Rockets fans in the aftermath of this is that Alperen Sengun's days are numbered and he's gone. No. Ime Udoka prides himself on having an offense where guys can pass and play make for each other and move the ball and, kind of have this, identity offensively where they share the basketball with one another and it's no one guy over another guy. And I think that Sengun actually fits into that philosophy offensively beautifully. And I actually am really excited about seeing what Ime Udoka could do with Sengun on the defensive side of the ball, right? Steven Silas was kind of just resigned to the fact that he could only use Sengun a certain way on defense. Now you've got Udoka who can be a bit more creative on the defensive side and maybe find some ways to get more out of Sengun on that side. And again, he's a coach who is going to demand more defensively, right? You're not going to get a flyer on not getting back in transition or giving up on a play defensively or complaining to the officials. None of that is going to fly under Ime Udoka. So all the complaining and belly aching that we've seen from Jalen and KPJ and Sengun and all that, that is going to be squashed expeditiously. I cannot wait to see those guys just head down, fighting and playing hard and working past some of the immaturity issues that we saw quite a bit on display over these past couple years. Ime Udoka is going to help this group of guys grow up considerably. And right, it's his job to yell and complain and antagonize the referees. And it's his players' jobs to go out there and fight hard, play hard, do their jobs on the basketball court. So when I'm sitting here thinking about what Udoka is going to provide to this team, I also think it's worth considering that, right, the Celtics, while they are clearly a much more experienced team and a better team than the Rockets, top team in the Eastern Conference, all that, and they made it to the finals, right? A ton of success. It's worth noting that Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown are younger star players, right? They are not these experienced, 28, 29, 30-year-old veterans who have been there, done that. It's not like that whatsoever. Ime gets, I think, some credit for coaching young talent with that Celtics team, right? Because Tatum and Brown, by all means, are young, talented star players. And so that's exactly the type of guy that you want coaching and training and developing a Jalen Green, an Alperen Sengun, a Jabari Smith Jr., a KPJ, a Tari, like all this young talent that the Rockets have. This is so much talent to work with. And now you've got a guy who was able to get the absolute most out of a Jason Tatum and a Jaylen Brown, and you're giving him all these young, talented, really raw, kind of unrefined players, and he's going to be able to mold them into successful NBA, maybe successful NBA stars, right? Like he could turn Jalen Green into a superstar. We'll see. But Jalen has talked constantly about wanting to be a two-way player, an impact player on defense, right? Jabari, Tari, guys who pride themselves on defense. Now they have a guy in Ime Udoka, a leader who's going to provide that structure, who's going to provide that accountability, and who is going to get the most out of them on both sides of the court, right? Not this, again, just kind of roll the ball out there and let it happen and this, that, and the end. Not any more of the, where is it?
They're not getting after it like they're supposed to.
If Udoka pulls that move and slaps the Rockets press conference table, I'm telling you, it's breaking in two. It's breaking in half. He's 6'8", 240. That table is not going to stand a chance if he does one of those like Silas did. Oh, man. Coming up, I want to share more thoughts, impacts from the Udoka hire, how it might impact the draft, free agency, potential future acquisitions for this Rockets team. Again, there's been a lot of buzz about Jaylen Brown and his future with the Boston Celtics. Could he be headed to Houston because of this Ime hire? All things to consider. We're going to get there in just one moment, but first, today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Pro Basketball GM. Look, Ultimate Pro Basketball GM is the best mobile game I've played in a long time. It's super addicting. It's a ton of fun. I've always thought I could be a great NBA GM, and as it turns out, it's not actually as easy as I thought it would be, right? If you've had the same thought, you've got to check out this game. It allows you to manage every strategic aspect of a franchise, playing through seasons and leading your franchise and fans to glory as you build a historic dynasty. In the simulation, you're responsible for dealing with challenging personalities, hiring the right coaches and assistants, trading and training players, making draft picks, navigating your franchise through free agency, the draft, and all the ups and downs of multiple seasons. All this in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Pro Basketball GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. Look, me and the other Locked On hosts, we went ahead and made ourselves a league, and we've gone through like multiple seasons already, tons of trash talk, championships won, players traded, all that good stuff. It has been a ton of fun. And right now, Locked On Rockets listeners can get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using promo code LOCKEDON in the game store. So make sure to check it out. To download the game, just visit probasketballgm.com, scan the QR code, or look it up on the App Store. That's probasketballgm.com. Ultimate Basketball GM. Start your dynasty today. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Oh, man. This is such a great time. This offseason. We had hyped up this offseason for so long, and it's like, like the light at the end of the tunnel. And this is just the first domino, right? There's still so many other big moves and big things that have to happen this offseason, but the fact that they nailed this first step, this first stepping stone towards becoming a better organization, getting things back on track, moving in the right direction, all that, it's incredible. Ime Udoka, head coach, Houston Rockets. Whew, so much fun to say. There are question marks. There are a lot of considerations, things to consider about how things are going to be handled moving forward. So let's go with one. Who are the assistant coaches going to be, right? Who will Udoka tap as his assistant coaches? Because the guys that he was relying on in Boston are currently unavailable, right? Will Hardy was a big piece in Boston during his tenure, and he's now head coach of the Jazz. Joe Mazzulla was on the staff, and he is now head coach of the Celtics. Damon Stoudemire was on that staff, and he is going to be coaching, I'm blanking on the team, but he's going to be coaching a collegiate team, I believe. So, those names are gone, right? So how deep does Udoka's bag go as far as names and guys that he can reach out to and find and kind of fill out his coaching staff? I do hope, again, I really do hope he will take a hard look at John Lucas and Mahmoud Abdel-Fattah and decide whether or not he wants to bring them around. Because could you imagine a sideline, just those three names alone? Udoka, Lucas, Abdel-Fattah. I mean, as far as a sideline of guys who are seriously going to be like these heavy-handed, tear into you, like no-nonsense type coaches. That's exactly what you're getting just out of those three guys, right? Like three, we'll call them bad cops if you want to. I mean, I don't know how else to do it. It's exciting to think about, but I'm also very curious, again, how deep his bag goes as far as potential assistant coaches and rounding out an assistant coaching tree. And then on top of that, it's worth noting, right? James Borrego and Ime Udoka do go way back. So he could be one of those names where if Borrego doesn't find himself with a head coaching position at another organization, right? If he doesn't get maybe the Pistons job, or if another position opens up and he doesn't get it there, what better position to land in than to work with your longtime associate in Ime Udoka as a lead assistant here with the Houston Rockets, a young up-and-coming team. I really think it makes so much sense that I'm struggling seeing it not happen at this point. So, especially because the Rockets already interviewed him. So the Rockets also got their own taste of what Borrego brings to the table. So they could very much be in alignment on, hey, we interviewed Borrego. We really like him. Ime, you want to bring him in? And Ime's like, oh, I've already texted him. Like he's packing his bags. He's getting ready to move his family to Houston. Like that could be the situation waiting to unfold. So it'll be really interesting to see what direction Udoka ultimately goes with his assistant coaching staff. Because again, Rafael Stone was very upfront about the fact, saying it's going to be up to the next head coach, right? The next head coach is going to pick his assistants. We're going to give him full autonomy to do that. And I do think, right, like when you look at this decision is Udoka is going to have quite a bit more say-so. He's going to have a lot more weight to throw around, literally and figuratively, than Stephen Silas did, right? Stone, I think, by making this decision, Stone had to understand that he was probably giving up some level of control by hiring Ime Udoka. And that's a good thing, right? Because I think when we look at these past couple of years, maybe Stone had too much control, too much say. And when you look at their personalities between Stone and Silas, Stone very clearly the more dominant personality. So when he would suggest things or employ, like, Silas wasn't going to push back on any of that. You think Udoka is going to stand for Stone meddling or interfering or telling him what to do or how to do his job? Absolutely not. So I think we can put to rest any ideas of Stone meddling in a practice or telling Udoka what to run or what players to play. Like that had to have been part of the conversation where Udoka's like, no, like I'm going to do things my way. And you guys are going to have to sign up for that, right? He had to sell them on his vision. But at the same time, Stone is, by bringing Udoka in, has to kind of relinquish some of the power that he's probably had over these last couple of years. And again, that is a good thing. And those are, for me, those are good, like those are positive points in Stone's favor. That was going to be a big question mark for me is with this next head coaching hires. If they brought in some no-name, whoever, assistant coach from another team, there would have been concerns about, okay, well, how much control does Stone actually have over this head coach? I think you can put those concerns to rest with the hire of Ime Udoka. Now, I also wonder, how much Ime is a guy that players seemingly around the league love, right? So I do think that there's going to be, like, hiring him when the Rockets did and having him to navigate this process through the rest of the offseason, through the draft, free agency. This is going to be a big one because Udoka is going to be the selling point for potential free agents, right? Hey, come play for Ime Udoka, right? Come join this young Houston Rockets team. We've got a very exciting future, right? Come sign a 3 or a 4-year deal and come be with us for a while. Come grow with us. And Udoka being able to sell guys on that vision is going to be huge. I do wonder how much impact and how much say-so he will have over the actual roster construction moving forward, because one area to consider is, like, does this change the calculus on the James Harden situation, right? Does Udoka want a James Harden? If the Rockets don't land a Scoot Henderson in the draft, was Udoka sold on coming to Houston because the Rockets sold them on, hey, we've got $60 million in cap space and James really wants to come home. Do you want to come coach James Harden? And Udoka was like, hell yeah, I want to come coach James Harden. Plus all that other young talent, sign me up. Let's go. Because Udoka's never had like a floor general type player like James Harden, right? A true facilitator, primary playmaker, right? He made it work with Tatum and Brown and Marcus Smart in Boston. He had all these wings, but he's never had a guy like James Harden. So that could be one wrinkle to consider as the Rockets approach free agency and their plans for this offseason. At this point, I've subscribed to the idea. I think the right way to build this team out is to just continue along the track of letting the young guys grow and develop, bringing in those stable veterans. We've heard some murmurs about Cam Johnson, reportedly, seeking somewhere in the range of like 90 to 100 million over 4 years. And the Rockets have emerged as one of those teams that could potentially be going after a Cam Johnson type. Jalen Brown, and the chance that the Rockets may pursue a Jalen Brown trade before he becomes a free agent next offseason. That's a guy who has an incredibly tight and strong relationship with Ime Udoka. Maybe that's something that the Rockets decide to pursue a little bit earlier and they pursue an actual trade this offseason. Grant Williams was a name that was tied to the Rockets at this previous deadline, a guy who's played for Ime Udoka. The roots run incredibly deep with Udoka and how much impact he might have over who the Rockets could ultimately bring in to flesh out this roster and what this team is ultimately going to look like next season. So that's just another area to ultimately consider about what this hire kind of means. I just can't get away from thinking that this is truly the start of a new era in Houston Rockets basketball. Ime Udoka, as the head coach of this Houston Rockets team, it's going to be incredibly exciting to see what he's able to do with this group of guys. We haven't gotten details of the contract yet. I would assume it's going to be something like a 4 or maybe even a 5-year deal for Udoka, but we don't know quite just yet, at least at the time that I'm sitting down to record this. So I really do hope they get Scoot Henderson, though, because I would love to see what Udoka can do with a lineup of Scoot Henderson, Jalen Green, KPJ, Sengun, Jabari, Tari, like all that young talent. It's going to be such an exciting process watching him mold those guys and seeing the differences between how he approaches handling this young talent and how Silas approached handling this young talent for the past 3 years. So with that, that's what I've got for this final, this initial preliminary reaction episode to what Ime Udoka, to the hiring, I guess, of Ime Udoka as the next head coach of your Houston Rockets. I will say, though, just for the fun of it all, might as well run a tankathon spin to see who Ime Udoka gets out of this next draft, because maybe we can end things on a really, really positive note. I mean, it seems like the Rockets' luck is kind of turning in their favor, right? Where you nail the head coaching hire. The next thing is the draft lottery. That's the next big domino to fall for this Rockets team. So with that, the Rockets have the second best odds in the lottery. Let me just run a quick tankathon simulation as we are 21 days away from the draft lottery. Oh, maybe I just won't even read the results of this tankathon spin to not spoil the end of the episode. Rockets fell to 6th, and I'm so terribly sorry about that for spoiling the good vibes here at the end of the episode. But with that, that's going to do it for our initial reaction to Ime Udoka being hired as the next head coach of your Houston Rockets. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast. That's Apple, Spotify, Google, the Odyssey app, free and available on all podcast platforms. We're also available on YouTube. Go to YouTube, search Locked on Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Give us your thoughts on the Rockets hiring Ime Udoka as their next head coach. Let us know in the YouTube comments. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked on Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.